Right on cue. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 12th episode of Better Together with Aleo. And today, Daniel Root of Collaboration. We're discussing the upcoming InfoComm. What are the key trends? What to watch out for? What are the shifts in collaboration and the meeting space? Before we begin, a couple of user guidelines. We invite you to join us and use the emoticons on the screen where you will be able to share whether you like, approve, or disapprove what the guest and myself was saying. So we're putting ourselves on the line. Second point is at the bottom of your screen, you can see probably a couple of navigation buttons which you can use to select your own perspective, which you want to follow during this presentation. And finally, indeed, if you have a question at the end, the Q&A section, there's a chat box. You can put a question in there, and then we'll get a warning that somebody has been asking questions, and we'll answer them immediately or at the end of the podcast. Anyway, Dan, welcome. A lot of the people know you either from the UC communication space, either from the collaboration solution space, or more recently in the consulting branch of AV and high tech. But in the next couple of weeks, you're also going to support InfoComm very heavily with panels and with tours. But what people probably don't know, in this sector at least, is that you have a background in the automotive sector. So my first question to warm up is, first of all, how the hell did you get in that sector? And is there anything that you still have remembered or valued that you can still use today in high tech and AV?
Well, Glenn, first off, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a great fan of Aleo from the jump, and I have to say that the platform is just a really robust, powerful tool for companies large and small. As far as my background, I have dabbled quite a bit in the automotive sector over the years, both working for some of the car companies themselves and then also helping in the aftermarket world. I will say it starts from a passion that I have for mostly European vehicles, actually, specifically within the Audi and Porsche realm. So I really started both learning things at a dealership level when I was in high school, and then through college and afterwards, I owned my own detailing business, and then I helped start a wheel and suspension distribution company, which is still going very well and doing multi-million dollars worth of web business every year. And it just comes down to I enjoy cars. I love working on cars. I love taking things apart and putting them back together. And then also detailing a vehicle or spending time cutting a car, as they say, or buffing the paint of a vehicle. I find to be therapeutic. So I know most people would think about sitting there all day doing that being absolutely a waste of time. For me, it's a way that I can kind of zen out and just focus on the task at hand. But some of the things that I've taken from my experience in automotive is the attention to detail. One of the things that is really, really important is the experience of the customer from start to finish, or cradle to grave, as they say, when it comes to an automotive brand. So companies like Porsche or BMW really focus on everything down to the smell that is actually added to the HVAC system within its dealerships, and that actually changes based off of region for what it is the aesthetic that they're trying to achieve. And there's a fair amount of just nuances around where to place certain plants within a space so that it balances the eye and doesn't make it feel too industrial, even though automotive and cars in general tend to be much more on that industrial side. So I'm sure you've seen, as different brands have really grown over the last few years, things like Volvo. If you walk into a new Volvo dealer, it feels very natural. There's a lot of wood textures to balance out the metal of the vehicle, and that's both inside the cars as well as reflected in their dealerships. And I think that learning this much about how a dealership or how a showroom needs to be dialed in and looking at the overall experience that somebody has helped me a lot within tech, because tech kind of followed a little bit on that realm, just in the sense that employee experience has now become really a focal and center point for us, and really creating a space where people feel comfortable. We no longer see offices that are just drab, sea of cubes. Even in a call center situation, you will now have open spaces and you will have very organic textures and materials used across the space to make it feel just warmer and more inviting to the folks that have to come in and work on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, it's interesting how you tackle, on the one hand, let's say the overarching vision and feeling of this space, and yet the detail to make it simple, to make it inclusive, to make the technology work but while being invisible to the almost to the user or the person in that experience center or in that showroom. That is certainly something that on both levels you have probably created an eye for, talking to customers and working with customers to see how those two combine and how to find a solution for both, I'm assuming.
It's something that sounds so simple when you boil it down, but the nuance of it is something you can spend hours on top of hours really going through. And there are different perspectives and theories and approaches. But I would always encourage anybody to, just take a second look around when you walk into, whether it's your own car dealer that you're going to buy a vehicle for, or where you service it, but also when you go and look at some of the things for your office space. There are a lot of furniture companies and design firms that are out there. At one of my previous worlds, I was involved with Hayworth, which also taught me a lot about that same sort of philosophy of it's really in the details, and then understanding how placement really matters. And it's something we kind of take for granted in our day-to-day lives, how much time and expertise goes into really planning what does your eye see and how does that impact you and give you a feeling that you can get behind or buy into.
Mm-hmm. Does that mean that the role or the service of the AV sector has changed versus the old school AV, and now that they have to look at a different dimension from a reseller perspective?
Glenn, I think you're spot on. I would completely agree. It's really around the AV world used to really be boxes and maybe some installation for those boxes to bring some stuff together. But most of the time, AV was more worried about what was going on in the closet behind the conference room than they were worried about the experience within the conference room. And this started even before COVID, but COVID has definitely accelerated that as we've come back to a hybrid office and really trying to entice people to come back to the office, to say it's a holistic experience, and that employee that day is our customer. And so AV, IT, facilities, and even HR need to come together to really be able to create or curate an experience that their team can be proud of, but can also really buy into and help build the culture for folks within the team.
Yeah. So obviously the needs of the customer have changed. The reseller need to change, but I'm guessing that follows through the funnel to also the vendors, the hardware, the software that need to follow that requirement that is ultimately driven by the customer.
Absolutely, it's one of those things where we've seen a lot of devices become much more. I don't want to say the word like sexy, but much more incorporated in that sort of B2C type atmosphere. You've got companies, like Owl Labs that are spending a lot of time on the design of the product that goes into the room, and same thing with Logi and a few of the others. They've really upped the game, so to speak, to make sure that every little aspect of the technology that's being brought into the room really fits the aesthetic. And I mean, Aleo is a perfect example of that as well. The ability to curate the experience that we're in right now to fit the brand and be able to really represent itself at all times as exactly what we need to be able to foster the culture and also get buy-in from our customers, because at this point in time, things like a nice office or the aesthetic that you're using with the technology and software that you bring on board really comes into play when folks start to balance the rapport and the trust building as they're going through their decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. So taking that from what we've seen happening, maybe I want to take that and look at the trends of what you're expecting at InfoComm. I think, if I'm not mistaken, you've brought a little bit of content to highlight some of the things. So I'll let you kind of steer it from your end. But
Yeah.
what can you bring us for us? What you're expecting at InfoComm and in the next couple of, in a week or so, almost 10 days? Yeah.
So first off, what I would just say is if you haven't signed up to join InfoComm, whether you're going to do it remotely or in person, definitely hit the InfoComm website. Check out what's going on. There's going to be a ton of educational events, which actually start as soon as this Saturday through the weekend until about Tuesday. And then you're going to see it shift to the show floor for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which certainly hope to see you and your colleagues there. I'm sure I will.
Room
And
4055,
actually,
booth 4055, don't forget it.
and we'll get to that. And actually, a few of the events that I'm going to be doing while I'm there at the event is I'm hosting a panel on Tuesday, which is actually all about bringing the human resources, IT, and facilities decision makers together and really talking through how it is that we are determining what to outfit our next generation of offices with. That's going to be on June 13th at 1:30 in the afternoon. So if you are attending InfoComm already, or if you haven't signed up, please do so. But this will be part of the education track. And I'm really excited about this session because of the fact that we're focusing on who are the decision makers at the table and what are they bringing to that conversation, so that when you go back to your own company and your own group, you're able to look internally and say, how can we do this a little bit better? How is it that we can bring more voices into the conversation, so that once we've decided what rooms or what space we're going to outfit in our office, or what approach we're going to take to hybrid work, how do we then determine what types of products, what types of solutions are needed to enable our folks to work really well at home, but also accelerate those workflows when we're in the office, and using tools such as Aleo, or using UCC conferencing tools, something along those lines.
Okay, well, I will certainly. Do you have more content here to show? Because I want to, before we go there, maybe add the note that we don't forget. I think it's InfoComm 2023. And I'm going to add, for our sake, booth 4055. So it's in the notes. Nobody's going to forget. It's there. Sorry, go ahead.
Before I move on to the other pieces of content, it's a great time to highlight. I'm also hosting the Collaboration Show Floor Tour on Thursday, and my colleague, Craig Durr, will be hosting the session on Wednesday. I know that both of these sessions are pretty much fully booked at this point in time, but if you reach out to Avixa, they'll certainly, I've already told them, pack the house as far as I'm concerned. So if you're interested in learning about different technology companies, different collaboration vendors, we're going to be hosting that tour on Thursday starting at 1:30. And actually, Aleo will be highlighted in that tour as actually my final vendor. So if you decide to learn a little bit more about Aleo during that day, feel free to stay behind at the last booth. Just hand me your little earpiece, and I'll be the guide to take those back in for us, so that you can learn all about how to use this technology to your advantage and really how to accelerate the outcomes within your company. Some of the things that I also wanted to just mention, and I have a couple other pieces of content we can get back to as we talk the trends, is more around what we're seeing in the space. As we're seeing different types of technology come together, we've started to see some softwares be able to present in slightly different ways. And I think Aleo is a great example of that. We've had some innovations on the UCC side, but really the idea of, I need to make a memorable presentation. I need to be able to leave something with folks that they're going to go, wow, that was different than just sitting on my standard Teams or Zoom call. Not to knock either of those platforms. They do a great job for what they are, but it's much more about bringing the content to a meeting and doing a screen share than it is about bringing your meeting to a project or bringing your meeting to the content, which is, I really feel, where visual collaboration is accelerating outcomes and accelerating the workflows. And then the last thing that I'll mention here quickly before we keep going forward is just around the newer types of technology we're seeing within camera technology. And so we've seen a lot of camera. Oh, sorry, my picture did not come in as clear as I was hoping it would, but I think you can understand the impression I was going for here, which is we are now having multi-stream video, and we're now starting to see meshing of multi-stream video, which means you have multiple cameras in a space that will all come together seamlessly to give the best facial recognition or the best, attention-grabbing frame of you as you're talking or presenting within a room. One of the examples of this is Owl Labs. They're based out of Boston, so I'm a little bit biased, being a Boston boy myself. And they are also bringing out their new AV bar in conjunction with their center of the room Owl Pro 3. And the reason why this is interesting is because it allows for more movement in the space. It allows for folks to really be dynamic and not have to worry about always finding the single camera lens that we're used to. And it also really encourages touch interactivity, because if I walk up to a board, as we've all seen over the years, and I have a camera over the board or under the board, you're getting a really
Very
not
bad close-up.
flattering, yeah, not a flattering view of either somebody's midsection or my bald spot that I'm a little self-conscious about. So I try to talk to folks about, the need for having multi-camera, so that when you stand up and have a presenter, you're able to then switch, and it does that seamlessly, switches to another view for you. And one of the cool things about Owl is it does it over the air. So they call it Owl Connect, and it allows you to have no connection between your front of room device and your center of room device, and it wirelessly meshes. So when you stand up to present, it starts capturing it from a presenter view, and then when you sit down at the table, it'll switch back and forth depending on where you're looking. So there's some really cool stuff going
also,
on.
if I may add to that, I think it also specifically brings back the point you made earlier. The change of the hardware is linking with the need of the customer to be walking around, but also the flexibility of the room. You might be sitting, you might be standing, you might be walking, but it also brings in that the reseller has to start designing the rooms differently. It's not about, I either have a video conferencing room, or I have a meeting room, or I have a ideation room. Every room is to be flexible, and I need to start designing the rooms with the customer and for the customer with the equipment. So having a table against the wall is not longer maybe the best solution, because you're blocking off some of the use cases, I'm assuming.
And we've also seen a fair amount of vendors start to wade into, and I'll put this back over here for you, which, by the way, love the way that works. Such a seamless interaction there to be able to pull up content, highlight it, and put it back where it belongs. But we've also seen some companies start to come out with companion devices. So you've seen companies like D10 start to work with different vendors on a companion whiteboard that can be brought into any room, wirelessly connect to the call that's on hand or the software that you're using, and pull up that touch interactivity for that specific session. And then when you're done with it, you're able to roll it into the next room, or move on with it. And there's no real setup time or installation time when you're going from room to room, which has always been kind of a struggle. And it's a great way to kind of step your foot into utilizing interactive touch displays within your office. So I think we're going to see more of that coming along the lines, and I'm sure we're going to see a few different partnerships down the road with Aleo, in the sense of being able to bring all of your boards into a meeting room or into a shared space, and then be able to also move it to an open space for something more ad hoc or stand up, or be able to bring it to my desk so that I can pull up a whole project and be working on it right there with me, with maybe one other person, or even in a hybrid setting with some of the folks that aren't in the office.
I think there's three things that I want to touch upon, because you're a really good speaker, so you have a lot to say. So thank you for sharing with the audience. The first thing, I think, one of the key senses or the ideas that I love is bring the meeting to the content instead of the content to the meeting. And I think one of the ideas when you talk about that is, if you bring content and people and tools together, it very quickly becomes very, very complex if you have different applications and different formats and different tools and different hardware, and finding a solution that brings it all together nicely into an agnostic approach. Because you might have indeed D10 in one office, you might have a Surface Hub in another, you might have other equipment, WebEx and Zoom. How do you bring it together I think is a critical component to support that flexibility. And that brings us also to the fact that you might have a no-touch screen and a projector and touch screens. And I think that's one of the next questions I'm wondering. We talked with the GM of Avacor, the CEO of i3. We know we're very close to the people of Jupiter. And so, of course, as the market evolves, and even Apple is going touch now on their laptops, how do you see the drive for touch in the meeting room? As you said, the need and the question of the customer, the technology is changing. How do you see that impact the future trends or the shifts that we expect in the next couple of years?
Well, it does come down to work function. What you're trying to accomplish is really key to what technologies you're going to align with. Now, there are certain verticals, like law firms in general, that tend to be more about, we sit around a giant U-shaped desk and we talk about things. We don't really get up. We don't want to go to the front of the room. And there have been solutions that have been born out of that specific operating workflow. But For most companies, you have a design team, you have a product team, you have an engineering team. These are folks that like to get their hands dirty, so to speak. They want to stand up. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen a product room that has a sign on the outside of it saying, do not enter, because if you do, there's sticky notes all over the place. They got stuff written on a whiteboard. And so
Yeah,
the idea of
don't forget to take your picture to snap the sticky notes on the wall.
exactly. Then you're taking pictures. It becomes a very snapshot style of working, which is okay, but it still slows down, especially when you're talking about design thinking type workflows. You need to be able to go back and build on it, and that's one area where we've seen a lot of the tech try but not be able to really bring it together. And so the flexibility of a tool such as an Aleo, where you can bring this sort of sessions, bring the ideas to the workspace and be able to then grow upon that over the course of time, is really helping to accelerate what your outcome, what your goal is. Because now, if I have especially in a hybrid world, a sticky note room does not work for a hybrid world. You can't have somebody at a far end somehow seeing a 2x2 or 3x3 card stuck on a wall that I hand drew something on. That's just not going to work. I need something that's much more hands-on, something that I can participate in as a remote user. And so things that are really starting to drive more touch is the fact that hybrid's here to stay. And so these different workflows that really align to having an engaging type of experience require us to lean on something more like an Aleo, where we can actually bring folks together, whether I'm at my house, whether you're in Europe, and we can actually add our ideas to it. We can then build on those ideas, bring in the context of the different pieces. And that's one other thing that's always been slowed down in design thinking, is it's tough to bring the context to those ideas. Because if you're just doing a note card or a sticky card, that's a great, a single word, but I need to understand what are the different pieces of content that are out there that are really building off this idea. Show me an example. Show me something more than just a single word. And so technology now allows us to bring in different documents, different repositories, or different tools that we're using, whether it's a Jira or something along those lines. I can now bring specific instances and pieces of that to provide context to the idea that I'm bringing to the table. Now I can get cohesion or get everybody on board with the same idea, kind of that flying V technique, if we want to throw back to the Mighty Ducks here for a moment. But the idea of we need to all get in line and get behind the best idea to move forward. And so that is able to be accomplished a lot quicker and a lot more effectively if I'm able to give you context to what my idea is in the moment and allow you to go back and manipulate that over the course of time.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that related to that is, on the one hand, I think you talked about all these different solutions. The Harvard Business Review speaks about a cost of operation of 9% skipping between different applications in a meeting. Think about the sequential screen shares instead of having the multiple screen shares. And then add to that, in a normal traditional business model or business meeting, somebody's taking a sticky, then they digitize it to a picture, they send it via email, somebody's putting it in a PowerPoint, then they send it to another person that has to maybe use it in a presentation in Teams or Zoom, whatever. All these steps take a lot of time, which you can consolidate typically in one space. And then the other part that you mentioned, what was the use of the equitable participation. If I'm at home, typically I'm sitting behind my laptop, I don't have the same tools as the people in the meeting room. And being able to participate, as now we are sitting here and we're seeing the people, I don't know, wherever they are, using the emoticons to talk to me in Malaga, and you're close to Boston, and we're all communicating together. That's something that people feel participating in this experience. And I think that hybrid world, where we get the equitable participation on a multitude of tools, whether it's, and again, also there, different divisions, different departments have different tools, which typically means I can communicate within my department. It's very difficult to get out of my silo. And a tool that allows you to combine Figma with Google Sheets, with Teams, maybe with a 3D rendering model or a BI tool in one persistent space, that's where let's say, the synergies happen, and the ability to align across multiple departments in a company. That is at least what we are hearing from our side. That supports your story, I believe.
And that is really the breaking down of silos. In the initial days of COVID, silos became extremely difficult to break because you are stuck in your own set of tools, and having something that's cross-functional, something that allows for that flexibility, that to your point, participation equity is just crucial to the speed of your outcome or the speed of your project over the long term. And so you're seeing now a rift out in the industry. You can see certain companies that have kind of looked inward and kind of closed themselves inward, slowing down on their innovation. And you've seen companies that focus more on how do we create environments, but also how do we create teamwork that is able to be distributed across the world and allow for that flexibility for when we do have somebody from a different department come in to meet with us about something. They need to be able to bring their tools. And so you're seeing some different vendors and also just clients in general. The folks that tend to be more open, want to be flexible, want to find that common ground where we can all meet and exchange those ideas. They're accelerating in their innovation. They're accelerating in their outcome. Their product pace is picking up. And so we're seeing this now to the point where I imagine over the next year to 2 years, we're going to have a few really good studies come out that start to show the pace of innovation once you lean into something that is truly flexible and equitable to your entire corporation, rather than just a tool that's used for a single workflow or for a single purpose.
Yeah, that's not longer needed. Hey, Dan, I think we're about half an hour in. I want to ask, so I would like to, before we go to the Q&A, and everybody's, certainly the people that are listening, you can push the Q&A button and start putting questions in the chat box. But before we go there, I'd like to at least give the audience something to take away and ask them about, okay, what do they need to at least pay attention to? What do they need to ask when they go to, or if they go to InfoComm? What would be your top tips, let's say, to take along on their trip to InfoComm?
So I would say first off is we're seeing a change in aspect ratio on the types of displays that are out there. Obviously in projection, this has been kind of your choice, so to speak, over the years. But we're seeing it now, especially within interactive touch. So you've got a lot of 21:9 aspect ratio displays. It was kind of spurred initially by the Microsoft front room experience, but as that rolled out, the idea of having a divider between two 16:9 screens and still having some dead space on the sides just didn't make much sense. So you're seeing a lot of vendors come out with a single display that's 21:9, both touch and non-touch variants. So it's really interesting to see where that's going and how that can work into some of the spaces that you have. Now,
and I may say we are very fortunate that a lot of those vendors are choosing also to work with Aleo because they can maximize the space
exactly.
in the persistent cloud and getting all these functionalities within that space, not just video and content, but any type of content. So look out for some of those online.
You can, with that extra digital real estate, you can add a lot more to a meeting. And whether you're using something simple like a UC vendor that has a chat and a few other things, or you're using something that's really streamlining the process like an Aleo, you're able to add so much more to the overall meeting as far as context is concerned, as far as meeting notes, as far as what is being said within the meeting itself. That 21:9, I think, is going to continue to grow as a segment. That's not to say that we won't have any more 16:9, but I do see 21:9 becoming a really, really nice way to lay out digital content within meetings.
I think in some law firms I think in some law firms that's probably still a 4:3 projector somewhere in the meeting.
Yes, and I think there are definitely going to be some industries that'll stick to their projectors or stick to some, a few things. But I do think even in those rooms, especially large presentation spaces, having a 21:9 behind you allows you to really fill the entire background with the content that you're trying to share, and then having that, flanked potentially by some projection as far as specific call-outs, or maybe highlight me as the presenter to the larger audience that may be there. So I do think that you're going to still have a mix of touch and non-touch, but I do think that the 21:9 segment's definitely going to continue, and it certainly lends itself to visual collaboration. The more things I can put into that digital real estate and share with the folks that are in room, the easier it is to get that agreement, move forward towards our goal. Some of the other things that I'm seeing are, again, we kind of touched on this, but there's a lot of focus on how shifting camera dynamics are coming out. So you have companies like Crestron with One Beyond, 7 different cameras within a space and displays on every single wall. Not to say that that's going to be, the majority of rooms, because that's a pretty high price point to get into for
Yeah.
a room. But there are certain rooms where having that sort of a UN style presence is becoming more and more important, and having video quality or production quality that is close to professional or as close as you can possibly get while using AI type technologies is definitely going to continue to grow. So whether you're in a smaller segment or a smaller room, such as a small to medium conference room using something like an Owl Labs sort of an approach, or a medium room using something more along the lines of what Poly has been working on with their multi cameras that are coming to market, or in the largest spaces possible with something along a One Beyond. I do think that we're going to see more and more multi camera technology. And so it's really important to lean in and listen to those conversations right now, because they're still at the very beginning. And you, as the customer base, is what is the focus, is how do we make you look like movie stars every time you're in a meeting, and how can we make you look as best as possible in those types of calls, and especially external.
Which also leads to finding solutions that integrate all of that, not only to be able to capture multiple cameras flexibly,
Yep.
but also maybe add, remove, change cameras that
Yep.
keeps you open without having any legacy risk. So the flexibility of changing a room, adding components, is certainly, as those dynamics go faster and faster, that you have to keep open, or at least keep your mind open on what you use to bring it all together, I'm assuming.
And then the last thing I would focus on while you go to InfoComm is really about the integrations. There are a lot of different software solutions out there that say they integrate with others. But a lot of the times what that is a side-by-side solution where I can screen share. Maybe I can overlay it on a screen. I can't interact with it. And it's really just kind of a snapshot of the tool that I'm trying to use. And so finding products and platforms that are able to truly connect with the different repositories and the different tools you use in your day-to-day work is critical for the growth of your company over the next 5 to 7 years. You need to be able to pull in a live feed from what is really going on, a dashboard or something along those lines, and be able to have the ability to log back into that session later down the road and still have that be there, and not have to re-credential every single window, or go back and grab another snapshot and pull that in. So the more that you're talking with folks around your software solutions and that experience you're creating for your employees, it's really, really important to think about what are the tools I'm using already, and how is it that I can find a common repository or a common place to bring these things together across my cross-functional teams.
Well, Daniel, I wish I had the time to follow your tour. You clearly show the audience the wealth of information that you possess and that you're going to share at InfoComm. And I'm hoping that people will join you at the panels on the tour. And so we are at the end of our podcast. If anybody still has a question they want to ask Dan or me, don't hesitate to type it into the chat box. We will see if that comes up. If not, then I just want to say it was a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. I remember, maybe before we leave, 2022 ISE was my first year at Aleo, and I talked to some 100, 200 people. And I still remember you were one of the very few that got it. And that is a compliment, because it's not an easy matter to understand, to embrace, to see where this is going 2, 3 years from now, understanding the latent needs beyond just, I want to have a video and some whiteboarding. That was certainly a pleasure talking to you then, as it was today. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you,
I
Glenn.
hope to see you in Orlando.
I definitely will see you. You'll see me as I stop by, if nothing else, as the glorified show tour
Don't forget
guide.
your flower.
Yes, I'm gonna have a nice flag, like I'm on a cruise ship and things like that. And everybody, come on, let's go. I'll maybe grab some of those plain orange sticks so that I can keep everybody in line here. But I have to say, I've worked in visual collaboration since. Specifically in that segment since 2016, and I have learned a lot along the way. But I have to say that the reason why I have resonated with Aleo from the start is the way that you guys are able to really go between actually doing the work and then curating an experience to bring to the external resources, and allowing them to really come in and out of that critical time where it says, I need to garner acceptance. I need to get everybody on the same page. And a lot of the different tools that are out there just don't answer for that. And so it's something that I've seen from the clients perspective. I've seen from the users saying this is something I need. And so the first time you guys gave me the pitch, I was in. I was bought in. Yep, this solves some of the most critical problems that I've seen in the industry over the years, and it also allows for growth. And I think that's the key is a fair amount of the digital whiteboard offerings. It's very session based. It doesn't allow for you to grow into the platform. And that's something that, from the very first time I looked at this and met Brandon and yourself, I completely saw how a company can onboard and then grow with Aleo moving forward.
Dan, I couldn't have said it any better. You should work for us. Thank you so much.
And Megan know.
See you in Orlando.
Bye,
Dan.
been a pleasure, Glenn.
Thank you. Bye.
Take
Ciao.
care.